Welcome to the Providence College Podcast. Subscribe to the show on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and Google Play. If you like what you hear, please review and share with others. Email podcast@providence.edu with questions or comments. Go Friars!
Hello and welcome to the Providence College Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Chittum, and I'm joined, as always, by PC producer and videographer Chris Judge. Here at the Providence College Podcast, it's our job to bring you interesting stories from inside the Friar family. And today, we are fortunate to have Professor Adrian Weimer with us. Adrian, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
If you don't mind, I'm going to go into your biography real quick, and then we'll get it going. And we have here, you're a historian of colonial America and early modern religion and politics. And prior to coming to Providence College, you were an Andrew Mellon postdoc fellow at Rice University. You also worked at the University of Mississippi before coming to PC in 2011. You're now an associate professor in the Department of History. And recently, it's pretty exciting, you got 2 long-term fellowships through the National Endowment of the Humanities, which is going to take you through next year. And we're excited to talk to you about that. So thank you for joining us.
Great to be here.
So in January, you were featured in the William and Mary Quartlerly. And for people who listen to the Providence College Podcast, they may know that we also did an episode with Professor Ted Andrews, who was also featured in that same, not only that same journal, but that same edition, correct?
That's right.
So, and he was telling us that it was a big deal for him personally and professionally to get in there. So for you, what was it like in terms of the process of being admitted into that journal and getting it published?
Well, it took a long time to research the article, and then the Quarterly has a very intense, really wonderful editorial process. They're legendary in the field for that intensity. So to get a piece in the Quarterly was a goal of mine since grad school, and it was very exciting. And then it was just really fun that Ted and I, it all happened at the same time. He's been a great colleague and a great conversation partner.
So it wasn't as if you guys coordinated it to try to get in at the same time.
No.
I guess you probably couldn't do that even if you wanted to. And I should mention right now, there is quite a bit of construction here on campus. So if you hear a little fluctuation in the audio, please bear with us. I don't think there's a room on campus where there isn't some sort of noise seeping through the walls. So right now, if you do hear something, that's actually the science complex renovation that's happening here on campus. So this article I thought was very interesting. Is about Elizabeth Hooton and the Lived Politics of Toleration in Massachusetts Bay. Reading about Elizabeth Hooton, I feel like she could be a character in a Netflix episode, or a whole series, I should say. She lived a very crazy life, in the best sense of the word. So for you, what drew you to her story, and what made you want to pursue this in your writing?
Well, I've always been fascinated by Quakers, and especially these prophetic women who traveled all over the colonies. They were not afraid to speak out against what they saw as injustice or unfairness or lack of piety. And so she was fascinating because she went to so many different places, and she really did play a political role. She had this strong intervention. She wasn't afraid to go to the king and petition. She got a license to settle anywhere in the colonies, which is extraordinary in itself because Quakers are not allowed to settle in most places. So I thought her story deserved a fresh telling, and there were a lot of just exciting discoveries in the archives to support that.
Right, and she comes across as a very exciting and just independent character in a lot of ways. And how does that compare to kind of women in her era? I know even in today, by today's standards, she seems, kind of above and beyond what you'd expect out of most people. With that said, I would assume that in that era, it's on a whole different standard.
It's true, especially because she wasn't of the noble class. One of the most interesting discoveries among historians of women in politics in the last decade has been the work of Mary Beth Norton, who's a wonderful scholar, and she's done the work to prove that political access was related much more strongly to class than to sex. So noble women, somebody like Lady Frances Berkeley in Virginia, had political access. They had the ear of the king. They could run a colony. But somebody who wasn't of the noble class to have political access, that was a bigger deal.
So what was, so people who don't know, what does it take for someone like her to reach that higher echelon? What are the stumbling blocks to get there?
what it took was persistence. She would go over and over and over again. It also took confidence. She considered herself a prophet, like an Old Testament prophet. And so she was not afraid. She went in, she thought she had the truth, and she wouldn't back down. She would just go over and over and over again, till usually she got kicked out. And then she'd go back.
So, and obviously you have a situation where you literally have that combining in some sense of the religion and the politics because of that prophetic status that she carries. But at the same time, she's obviously lobbying for what she believes in. So do you feel like that helped or hurt her cause?
Oh, it's a good question. I think both. I think, what I argue in the article is that in one sense, the prophetic, charismatic authority that she brought to the table helped her because of the shock value, right? People didn't know what to do with her because she was so confident and she was biblically literate. She had an incredible way with words. On the other hand, sometimes I think, because she was so eccentric and she would do things that people didn't understand as part of the normal political process. I think that could also at times hurt her.
Right. And pardon my ignorance on the subject, but it seems like somebody who literally should have like a movie made after them. Mm-hmm. I wonder why something like that hasn't been made. I wasn't even familiar with the name until your article came to my attention.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is part of the challenge of doing both religious and political history at the same time, is that the field up until, just a couple of decades ago, political historians really didn't think that religion mattered a whole lot. And religious historians tended to travel along denominational lines. So Quaker historians know all about Elizabeth Hooton, but she wouldn't have been well known to a broader audience. So one of the things that I'm doing and a lot of us are doing right now is trying to pull these fields together and saying, in the 17th century as now, religion matters a lot for politics, both in the UK and in the United States and elsewhere. So, trying to bring these different stories together, I think helps a lot for understanding the period.
Right. And even for different, whether it's states or countries that want to divide the two in their governance, you can't divide the two within the constituents, right? It's like someone's life, it can be obviously, can be greatly affected by both at the same time. So it seems like it's always going to be a tough issue unless it's simply an autocratic state. You say this is what it's going to be and you don't have a say in the matter.
Right. And I taught a course for the first time this semester, a colloquium for sophomores on the history of religious liberty. We went all the way back to the medieval and then brought it forward. The students did projects on contemporary Supreme Court cases dealing with church state or religious liberty issues. And this was fascinating to see what the students found because they looked in depth at these different court cases. And the Supreme Court has said over and over again, there is no way to clearly divide religious and political issues or to pull religion out of our political process. It's simply, whereas, there's still sort of a myth of some kind of absolute separation, but the Supreme Court says over and over again, it's tough, right? These things have to be adjudicated in more complex ways.
So what were some of the topics or court cases that your students spend most of the time looking at?
All right. So, we looked at some of the cases about crash scenes on town squares and in front of town halls. Those are always interesting. And, can you put religious symbols like the nativity or the crash scene on a public space? We looked at oh my goodness, so many different kinds of courses. So many different kinds of court cases dealing with issues of where free speech and religion conflict. So what can you say about the Prophet Muhammad? What can you say about Jesus? What can so those were some of the cases. So, and then also cases involving religion in the public schools, and then cases involving state money towards religious schools. So Catholic schools or Jewish schools, or other kinds of schools. How much state can you have state money for textbooks, for busing, these things, all these cases were fascinating. I learned a lot. The students did some great work.
I can imagine, because some of these issues, especially if you have, a right to freedom of expression, yet at the same time, you're not allowed to combine church and state, that obviously is inherently a conflict that you never can resolve perfectly.
That's right. And I co-taught the course with a wonderful moral theologian who's really good at picking up on these conflicts and what two goods are in conflict and, how do we resolve this? So it was she was wonderful to team teach with Holly Taylor Coleman in theology.
Got it. Now, I was looking through your CV, and the amount of scholarship that you're currently doing and have done, it just seems like an amazing amount, frankly. Maybe I'm overselling it, but it really does seem like quite a bit. So for you, what's the drive to produce kind of that much work, and at the same time on so many not different topics, but obviously not exactly the same, the same topic over and over again, just going deeper and deeper?
Well, I mean, it's what I love to do. It's what I'm trained to do. And I was really thrilled to find a place where I can do the kind of work. I mean, it's really extraordinary to be able to get to do what I love, and PC is a great place to do it. And we have a writing group where we kind of urge each other on. There's historians locally. We present our work, and so we have a nice community of historians here in Providence that really helps to sharpen our scholarship and helps us to set goals for scholarships that's going to be meaningful in the field.
So how do you choose a topic?
Most things I come upon in the archives. So I've spent a lot of time in various archives. We have the John Carter Brown Library here in Providence, and Massachusetts Historical, or Connecticut Historical, or American Antiquarian, or anyway, there's loads of great archives. I think that the way I like to find topics is often to find things that either haven't been looked at or haven't been looked at in a long time, and try to get a sense for, where are the cracks and the fissures? Where do these documents highlight aspects of the historical record that, help us to push forward our understanding? Why I look for documents that don't make sense, because that's usually a great topic.
So how far of a deep dive do you have to do in a topic or into a person before you decide, all right, this doesn't qualify for something I'd look at because there already is a lot out there. I just wasn't aware of it at the time, versus, okay, yeah, this is something that would have kind of a sufficient unknown quality to it.
Yeah, I mean, part of the challenge is deciding whether the sources that I'm finding are enough material for an article or whether there's enough material for a book. There's a lot of things that, there's enough letters. I mean, the thing about early New England history is these people wrote and wrote and wrote. I mean, there's letters and diaries and court documents. You could not read it all in a lifetime. There's so much, even just for the 17th century. So there's no lack of sources, which other colonies don't have that problem, right? We, the Mass Bay, Connecticut, Plymouth, Rhode Island, they all have loads of sources.
Got it.
Finding enough for a book is a different matter. So, in this new project where I'm looking at the 1660s, there are loads of sources. And that's on the English side and the Netherlands side, as well as the New England side.
Right. And the name of that is, let's see, Godly Petitions, Puritanism and the Crisis of the Restoration in America. So first thing is, what exactly does that mean?
Well, so the Petitions is these people. One of the things that I first discovered about this project from our wonderful historian, Jenny Hale Pulsifer, wrote about the 1660s in a chapter, and she made the comment that at least a fourth of the freemen of Massachusetts Bay Colony signed petitions. Most of them, this was around 1664, 1665, most of them pledging their lives and their livelihoods in defense of the charter. So this is this resistance movement that very few people know about. So it's in between the Puritan Revolution, which is around the English Civil Wars, and the Glorious Revolution, and in New England that plays out by imprisoning the royal governor. And so it's this moment in between that most people don't know about, that there was this resistance movement. So basically, when the king comes back to power, Charles II, he tries to rewrite the law codes, redesign colonial governments. And the people of New England say, I don't think so, basically. So the royal commissioners come, and, at first they try to work with them, but there's mutual distrust, and they end up leaving unsatisfied. So a war breaks out, and it ends up not mattering for a couple more decades. But it's this really interesting moment when all these people, freemen and non-freemen, were writing petitions saying, basically, we're willing to fight.
Now, how did they get these petitions around Massachusetts Bay at that time? Is it just literally horseback going from town to town?
Yeah. Well, actually, the fastest way to travel is by sea. So ships would have been going up and down the coast. But sure, horseback walking.
Now, because back then, is it mostly all coastal towns?
A lot of them are coastal towns. There are interior towns, but there's also the river networks. So that was by far the fastest way to go.
Got it. So that is pretty interesting. I mean, it's not exactly something you would see nowadays, especially, I guess, in an established country like the United States of America. You wouldn't see a quarter of the population say, "I'm willing to die for this." I guess the equivalent would be joining the military. You'd have to have some sort of similar response or similar type of engagement. Mm-hmm. So for the individuals who decided to kind of take it to the next level and sign that petition, did they view it as, all right, this could actually come to fruition, or is it more of like a bluff or power play to try to influence?
That's a great question. They didn't know what the king was going to do. He pledged amnesty to Puritans or nonconformists. But then the Parliament at the time was basically imprisoning all different kinds of nonconforming Protestants. So people who weren't a part of the Church of England, which is the state church, they were getting put in prison. And Quakers were getting put on plague-infested boats. And so nobody knew what the king was going to do with New England, which is run by nonconformists, right? It's run by these dissenting Protestants. So they fortified the castle. They hid the charter. They signed these petitions. And they were kind of waiting to see what was going to happen. In the end, what ended up mattering was, the war broke out between England and the Netherlands. So the king had other issues to deal with. And Massachusetts had what the Royal Navy really needed, which was those big old growth forests, those for the ship masts. They had to have those big masts to run their navy. And so that helped.
Got it. So over the course of this year, you're going to be working on this because of 2 long-term research fellowships that you received from the National Endowment of the Humanities, or for the Humanities. I mean, so first of all, what does that mean when you get a fellowship like that? And I just want to preface it by saying, this went to an email. This was in an email that was sent to a lot of people from Chris Monahan, who's the director of sponsored research and programs here at PC, and basically goes on to say that landing 2 such fellowships is extraordinarily rare, and singing your praises for doing so. So first of all, congratulations. And secondly, what exactly does that mean for you, your research, and what 2017/2018 is going to look like?
Oh, thank you. And we're very fortunate to have Chris Monahan here at PC. So it means that I get to take a full year sabbatical. So I've never had a full year. It's very exciting to have all this time to write. It means I'll be in residence at these 2 wonderful research archives, nationally, internationally renowned research archives, one in Boston and one in Worcester. So, and the staff there are incredible. They know your project. They help you find sources for their project. They're incredibly knowledgeable about the archival materials, what's there, how to find what's there. And, there's just loads and loads of material. So it really helps to have access to it and to have people around who know how to navigate all that material. So I'm very excited. I'll be in residence there, so that means I'll get to go to the libraries every day. I'll get to meet all the scholars who come through, including all the grad students, which is always a nice part of being a fellow. You get to meet some of the younger scholars and get to hear about what they're working on.
Now, do you set any goals for either your research or your writing over the course of that year? How does your work process flow?
Well, it helps to have deadlines. And so both archives have asked me to give a public talk, and so those are already scheduled. I'll give one in December at the Massachusetts Historical Society. And so I deliberately set the title for that on a piece I haven't written, a chapter of the new book I haven't written. So that's a big deadline.
Oh, that's bold.
To get that. Well, and then, there's conferences and other things throughout the year. So I do try to set deadlines for myself because, the year seems like a long time, but in reality, it goes by pretty quickly.
I can imagine. I can see after a few months looking down and saying, oh, I know that's what happened to me. I'm a procrastinator by nature, so I can see it being November and saying, oh, my goodness, what have I done? But
I'm right there with you.
So after you finish, I guess, that academic year, would you then start doing summer classes, or would you just start in the following fall into a normal coursework?
I'll start the following fall.
Got it. So you still have that summer as well. Right. So do you already know what classes you'd be teaching? Do you have to kind of prepare for those in addition to some of the work you'd be doing?
I am not sure what I'll be teaching. I've been teaching for the last couple of years in the honors program, so teaching Western civilization. And I also teach colonial American history, and I teach the history of North American religious history. And I also have a couple other courses I'd like to teach, and I hope to teach the religious liberty course. Again, that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And just seeing you, I know this isn't a video podcast, so no one can actually see what I'm talking about, but I can just see you light up when you brought that up, and it's pretty clear that you have a fondness for it. Now, when you teach in the honors department, what exactly does that mean for people who don't know what the liberal arts honors program is at PC?
Right. So the Honors College is a group of students from across the college. So they might be, specialists in history or English or science, but they all take the same Civ courses, and they are smaller classes. So we only have 12 students in our seminars, and we have them for the whole year, which I love because that means you really get to know students. I always feel like I kind of get to know students by middle of the semester. And then by the end, you're thinking, oh, we were just, starting to understand your learning process and what learning techniques work the best and for which student. And with honors being a full year with the same students, you really get to know them and get a sense of their progress over the course of the year.
I bet the second semester must really move for you because you feel like you're really dialed into the students. They're dialed into you. Do you feel like you can cover more topics or the density of the topics quicker than you would, say, the beginning of the first semester?
It does. The course gets progressively more difficult, which sometimes the students protest a little bit, right? Because even the amount of reading. But we also say, this you would be bored, right? I mean, the goal is to challenge the students. And also, the assignments get harder. So we're looking for real progress in their writing skills, their critical thinking skills. And so we do ramp it up second semester.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, good luck with your research this upcoming year. I can't wait to see or read this book when it comes out. I know just the article on Elizabeth Hooton was such a, this is an awful play on words, was such a hoot that I would love to say. I can't wait for the other book to come out. And thank you for everything you do on campus.
Thank you.